Hello everyone, welcome to that video that everyone seems to be doing right now, or at least they have been for the past couple of weeks, where we talk about movies that are our favourites that were released in our lifetime. Is that the title of the videos? Basically, I look at movies that were released every year since I was born and choose a favourite. But I've limited myself Major League because, there are some obvious answers that are going to be in this video, but for the most part, all of these films are actually films I've logged on Letterboxd. These aren't films that... there will be films each year that I much prefer in reality that I'm not thinking of right now. But, because I haven't done the research. I feel like I was like, is it too lazy to not do it the proper way? Like, going through every single film released for the past 25 years. But I decided against that. I'm like, I will just look at my Letterboxd and see if there's ones that I will happily choose from that list. Most of these I've given 4 to 5 stars. Some of them 3.5. Some of them are not deserving of their star rating, but we'll see how it goes. And I've actually done alternates for each one. Some listings, for some years, I've done 3 movies because it's really difficult. So I will point out my preference, but then I'll do like an honourable mention for some years. So, I was born in 1998. What a year. Stuff happened. I don't give a shit about most of it. I did have the idea of doing a video of talking about my favourite film releases from 1998, but, maybe another day. Anyway, what is my favourite film from the year I was born? According to Letterboxd, the XFiles movie came out the year I was born. This being, is it just called The XFiles? Or it's called Fight the Future. But yes, came out in 1998, it was directed by Rob Bowman. I've watched this film 2 or 3, maybe even 4 times now. I know I watched it initially when I first watched the show back in the early 2000s. I'd rewatched it in my teens, and I know I watched it last year, if not earlier this year, I'm pretty sure it was last year, I think it's on like Disney Plus now, and my mate Guy, he loves X-Files, and to be fair, I don't blame him. Good show. We watched it in October of 2021. You're kidding me? Wow, that was 2 years ago. Okay, I didn't realise it was that long ago. I thought we watched it more recently, but I realised that we keep watching X-Files episodes randomly throughout the year. So, either way, I watched it back in 2021. As an X-Files fan, it's an amazing film, and as a fan of film, it's just a solid flick by itself. Like, you could watch X-Files, the X-Files movie, and not have any context for the rest of the show, and I really like that about it. It goes into your classic, FBI stuff, but then it does dive deep into the mythos with aliens and the extraterrestrials and all that jazz. It's really fun, it's really well made, it's a really, really solid flick. 1999, we have... My choice is probably not going to surprise, but also probably might. It's Toy Story 2. My honourable mention was The Matrix, but I think I've always enjoyed the Toy Story films more. I don't know, The Matrix is a masterpiece, what can I say? But for me, my favourite film would be Toy Story 2, because I love that it's a film that reminds me of my childhood, because I grew up, with those films, and it's a film that if I could have added the first Toy Story film, I would have, but that came out in like 95, which is my preferred one. I think the first one is my favourite of all those films, but I've always loved the second one. I used to have them as toys, all that kind of stuff. I didn't have the Matrix as toys, did I? No, I didn't. I didn't watch the Matrix till I was in my teens, so, for a film like Toy Story 2 that I've watched an endless amount of times, it just means something more to me than The Matrix does. Number 3 is ScoobyDoo and the Alien Invaders. Yeah, that one. This is probably my favourite of the animated films, which, again, I grew up with ScoobyDoo as a kid. This was one I had either on VHS or DVD. I think I had it on DVD. I never grew up with Zombie Island, which is the one that a lot of people who grew up with the 90s films always praise that one as, like, the best one. And sure, it's probably the best animated film for, the Scooby-Doo films, which is perfectly fine, it's the first one to actually do the monsters are real kind of jazz. But different to what you expect, much like what the 2002 film does, which is basically just like a poor man's version of, you know, the Zombie Island film, but at the same time, I really still love the 2002 film anyway, because sometimes you just gotta love what you love, you know? I saw that one first, that one had more impact on me compared to the previous one. So, this one is just my favourite of the animated ones. I rewatched it recently because I've got a 4-disc box set that comes with 4 of the films, including Zombie Island. For some reason, it doesn't have Cyber Chase. It replaced that one with the Loch Ness Monster one, which has a different cast and different production values, which is really annoying because that film came out in like 2004. I'm like, why is this on the set? If they had to come out with if it had been with bloody Cyber Chase, that would have been amazing. It would have been a spot-on set. But, you know, sometimes you get what you're given. But still, it was really fun rewatching it, and honestly, I've always loved the art style, I've loved the character dynamics. It's just a really fun film, even watching it as an adult. They still have that kind of, you know, Zombie Island twist where there are actual aliens, it's just not the ones that you think of. And also, I've always loved aliens to some degree. You know, I mean, the XFiles, for fuck's sake, you know. One of my favourite films is Alien, you know, just that kind of stuff has always been interesting to me. So, mostly because I just like monster stuff anyway and horror, so there might be a theme throughout some of these. Anyway, then we get to 2001. This was a tough one, but I consider my favourite one to be Amelie. For me, like a 5-star movie, probably. It was probably my first French film. A lot of people of like my generation who watch it now are very... I don't know, I feel like they probably take it with the approach that you would of someone who's... If you were to watch for the first time and you're like teens to 20s now, and say the same thing if you get into Wes Anderson in your teens to 20s, you'd have that very particular outlook. I think back in 2014 you'd call it hipster, now you call it obnoxious. Either way, I loved it before I was a teenager, I loved it as a kid. I've always loved it, you know. One of my favourite films, probably my favourite French film. For the year it came out, I had to put it up against Mulholland Drive and Shrek. And I know those are two very vastly different films, but I wouldn't say Mulholland Drive's had as much of an impact on me as, like, other David Lynch films. Like, I much prefer a lot more David Lynch films on top of Mulholland Drive. Like, I prefer Fire Walk With Me. Sometimes I prefer Inland Empire, not all the time. And I always prefer Eraserhead. So, like, Mulholland Drive's still up there as one of my favourite of his, but not enough to put on the impact of when I compare it to Amelie. In terms of my preference, in terms of my love for the film, Amelie always shines. Shrek would be the real contrast there. That's the one that I'm like, oh crap, do I put Shrek in or not? Because Shrek's great. I love Shrek, but I don't know. Amelie, I have a different appeal to. It broadened my margins in terms of French films, in terms of like live action surrealism, and just the kind of cutesy, weird stuff that they do in that movie. I love it. I adore it. You know, it is what it is. 2002, you know what the choice is. I've basically already mentioned it. It's ScoobyDoo 2002, baby, because this is a 5-star masterpiece. There is nothing wrong with this movie except for the fact that they didn't include half the deleted scenes, which they really should have done because it adds a bit more context that would have fleshed out some of the scenes. But outside of that, I love this film. I met Scooby-Doo recently. Neil Vanning, he did the voice of Scooby-Doo. Either way, met him twice. It was wonderful. Check out my video I did about Supernova. It's in one of my this weekends. Got VHS of Scooby-Doo signed by him. This was a childhood favourite again. I didn't have Zombie Island growing up, I had this. And honestly, I don't regret it in the slightest. I do like Zombie Island. I feel like a lot of Scooby-Doo fans would hate me if I didn't. And I'm like, no, it's still a good film. I prefer Alien Invaders, I prefer Scooby-Doo 2002, Scooby-Doo the movie on top of it. I don't really like calling it Scooby-Doo the movie. I don't like movies that have the movie in the title, like the X-Files the movie. Nah, it's Fight the Future. Anyway, so this one's just an undeniable classic. Then, 2003, we've got Kill Bill. Kill Bill, another one of those... It was one of my first Tarantino films. I watched it as a kid before I, really probably shouldn't have. But, like, at the same time, it's one of those... It's just uber violence over, like, uber sexual or anything. And I've always loved it. It's one of my favorite films. It's my second favorite of Tarantino's. I know, Yeah, do I have... my favourite of his is coming up. You'll see. But, yeah, it's got a great visual style. It's one of those films, again, that it can allow you to, because it's inspired by so many other films that came before it, like Lady Snowblood and whatnot, it makes you want to dive into that, area of film history. And because of it, I have, of course, looked into older Japanese films, including samurai films and female-focused samurai films. So, not just samurai films, but just female-focused Japanese films. So, that's always been interesting to me, even if some of those films are mostly exploitative, because sometimes it's how they had to get it made, like with Jackie Brown and blaxploitation kind of deal. So, Then in 2004, we have The Incredibles, because this is probably my favorite Pixar movie. Yeah, basically. I mean, I love Monsters, Inc., but I think Monsters, Inc. was that before my time? When the hell was Monsters, Inc.? No, 2001. What the hell did I put in for 2001? Emily. Yeah, Incredibles. I don't know. I've always absolutely loved it. I always loved the characters. Because I grew up with two brothers, if we were to play as the characters, I mean, no one could really play as Jack if you're going to be realistic. But it also gave the factor of, I have all the powers. I just liked Dash. I liked Violet. I had a crush on Violet. That was probably my first ever film crush. So that says a lot. Woof. Like prior to, because I think I watched The Incredibles maybe before. I was 6 years, 6 years old. So maybe I'd seen ScoobyDoo in the movie before that. I don't know, so maybe, I feel like the first crush that impacted it was Violet, so that's, anyway. 2005, we have Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I had this up against Robots, but I figured, look, if we're going to look at films that I really enjoy rewatching, I mean, it's still both of them, I adore Robots, but... the one with Ewan McGregor and Big World, childhood favourite, one of my many. But Kiss Kiss Bang Bang has just always been a lot of fun. I love I love Shane Black's style of, like, detective mystery film. He hasn't done a lot of it, but the stuff he has done is great. The Nice Guys, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, amazing. This has some very fun performances in it. Michelle Monaghan in particular, I adore in this film. So for a lot of various reasons, but it's always great. I've always loved watching this film. I've seen it like 3 times now, I think. Like a lot of these films I've watched a lot of times anyway, but this is like in my like Letterboxd history. I'm pretty sure I've watched Kiss Kiss Bang Bang at least 3 times. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. I've reviewed it twice. I've definitely watched it 3 times. I watched it twice on Letterboxd. I think once I got the Blu-ray, I'd watched it a second time on Blu-ray, and then I watched it on streaming with my friends, and we always want to go back to watching it because we have such a fun time watching it. So, yeah. And then 2006, you get Paprika, the Satoshi Kon film. My favorite of his, the first one of his I ever watched, and it's my preferred version over something like Inception. It's just one of those things where I really loved it because it delved into what I really like about cinema, where you can delve into different realms, the kind of surrealist thing that I really enjoy. So it just has that effect where, it goes into different worlds because it's animation. You can get all these different variations from it, and it's what I like about his works in general. They all have that kind of surrealist element to them. And to some of them, like, say, Perfect Blue, it can be terrifying. But something like, I say, more Millennium Actress and Paprika, it's a lot more fun or dramatic. So, yeah, and this one's just really fun. It does have some terrifying sequences, but I've always enjoyed it. I think it's a wonderful film. 2007 is Death Proof. My favourite Tarantino. There's no real comparison here. For me, it's a perfect film. I'm not even huge on the genre it spawns from. I don't really care much for people who have fast cars. I'm going to do like the Fast and Furious. Okay, like the Grindhouse type of thing. Like, because I watched the Grindhouse double feature. I adored Death Proof. I even remember the first time I watched it because it was on SBS as a Kurt Russell fest, which actually was what first got me onto watching The Thing. Not because it was on TV, because I had missed it that week, and I was like, oh damn, well I've got the Blu-ray, I might as well watch it, so I did. And then they had Death Proof that following week, and Death Proof was great. Like, the guy who presented it mentioned, like, how there was, like, oh, there's a missing reel scene which you can find on YouTube. There's an extended cut as well, which has those scenes in it. I've seen both versions. I prefer the extended cut, but I find a lot of joy in watching the Grindhouse cut, both because of the, missing reel part, but also because of the fake trailers that come after Planet Terror, which I've never loved Planet Terror, but I do enjoy it. But Death Proof, I don't know, there's just something about it that I've always just absolutely adored. It might be Mary Elizabeth Winstead. It probably is. But at the same time, I love the cast. I love the style of it. The music is fun. The sequences are great. So it's wonderful. That last scene with Zoe Bell, fucking love it. So it's good stuff. Next is pretty hard. This is 2008. I really wanted to put in Speed Racer here, but I haven't watched it in a few years now. Like, I haven't watched it since pre-Letterboxd. I think it was maybe 2017, if not very early 2018 that I watched it, because they had it on, like, 35mm. That's my honorable mention, because I haven't watched it since. I adore it as a film. Because I'm going strictly based off what's on my Letterboxd, I have to go with my favourite one that I've actually logged on Letterboxd for the year, which is The Dark Knight. A lot of these kind of lists, I want to go with something that's a bit more different to the norm. Like, oh, you look at 2008 movies, a lot of great movies in 2008, and then you get The Dark Knight, and you're like, you know what? It's still really goddamn good. Like, it's never been a bad film, but it's also one of those things of, because, what the superhero genre has done to cinema, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of its appeal that wane a little on me. That's not a pun. But at the same time, I've always loved it. I think it's a fantastic film. I would love to see it in IMAX one day. They just never bring it back, do they? Which is really disappointing. But, yeah. But again, that contrast with Speed Racer, I mean, cinema really peaked in 2008, didn't it? Anyway, they're both like masterpiece 5-star films, so, but again, I haven't logged Speed Racer, so I can't give it a certified, guaranteed sticker. But I want to put it in there as the honorable mention. 2009, Fantastic Mr. Fox. This is my favourite of Wes Anderson's films. Not my first of his. Grand Budapest was my first of his. I think Rushmore, at times, is my favourite, but I just really enjoyed it the first time I watched it. I haven't seen it since, and that was a few years back. But Fantastic Mr. Fox I've seen like 2 or 3 times now, and it's one of those things, you put it on and you just glued to it. It has that effect for me, and I love stop motion animation. I don't mind Isle of Dogs as his other stop motion, probably smoother animation, but I just love the story and the acting, the style of Fantastic Mr. Fox. I think it's just a really nicely done film. I never even read the original book that it was based on, so I have no, comparison for that, even though I think it's probably decently faithful, even though it's like a short story, but I just love it. It's so fun to watch. I've watched it several times now because I'm just like, I enjoyed it every time, It's great stuff. I mean, he's got a style, and for stop motion, I think it really works. I mean, I do like his live action style as well. I have no real criticisms against Wes Anderson. Not really. I mean, we're in an era now where they're doing that AI version of Wes Anderson. It's just doing my head in. Twitter fucking sucks. Anyway, 2010. This is where cinema for me real kicked off. It's Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. There's no other obvious choice. It's Scott Pilgrim. What else? It's my third favorite film of all time. Probably, I sometimes pin it as my second favorite. Look, it's against Blade Runner 2049 and Evil Dead 2, so it's, Anyway, I don't really have much to say about this. I love the visuals, I love the characters, I love the actors, I love the director, I love everything about this goddamn movie. I've watched it countless amounts of times in the past 13 years. I've even watched it already this year. I'll probably watch it again later this year. I just love watching it. It's a joy to watch. It's a joy of a movie. It's probably one of those defining a personality kind of things. Like, I say particular things that are not verbatim, but like in a style that some of the characters in the film say things, to the point that my mate pointed out recently, and he's like, can you stop saying shit as if you're in Scott Pilgrim? I'm like, dude, I didn't even realize I talked like that. That was just how I talk, you know? He doesn't like the film, so that's just his problem. So, still, hey, he chooses to be friends with someone who loves Scott Pilgrim. And Edgar Wright, that's his problem, not mine. Next up, we have 2011. This is a tricky one. I've gone with Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I think I've only seen it the once, but of the two films they have for this year in particular, it's the one I've seen the least amount of times, because the honorable mention is Sucker Punch. And I've seen the theatrical cut of Sucker Punch like 2 or 3 times, but I really like the extended cut. Like, the extended director's cut is just better. It's a much better film, much better fleshed out, but it's one of those films that I need to be in a very particular mindset to enjoy its dumbness, because it's still really dumb, but I still really like it. The visual style is really fun, the action sequences, the story. It's still a brutal film, but I really enjoy it. I guess you can kind of say the same thing for the Dragon Tattoo, but Dragon Tattoo is much more masterfully done. Fincher's, it's one of his best, which is not saying a lot, because all of his films are one of his best, except, I mean, you could argue except for Alien 3, but I've seen the longer version of Alien 3, and though it's not as much of a Fincher film, because again, it's like a director-for-hire kind of deal, I still really like Alien 3. But yes, Girl with Dragon Tattoo, it's just a good film. It's a good mystery. I've seen the Swedish trilogy. They're fine. I saw parts of the Spiders Gill, whatever the crap, awful tried of sequel they tried doing with Claire Foy. Bad. Just bad. I wish they would have made a sequel to Dragon Tattoo, even if it was just the one. Like, it's clearly there, set up for a sequel. Not really set up for a sequel, but there's clearly enough that they could have done to continue with the characters, but alas, they did not. And so we move on to 2012. Jeez, that was 2012. Resident Evil Retribution. I know. Throw your stones at me. But I love this movie. I was going to say I love the Resident Evil films. I don't love the Resident Evil films. I have a guilty pleasure for the Resident Evil films. I really enjoy watching them, because once you realize the exact kind of dumb schlock they are, you can really enjoy them. Similar to the Fast and Furious. There's just an edge to that type of cinema where it's like, this is either the dumbest shit you've ever seen, or this is like, not even the most brilliant. This is the most fun shit you've ever seen. None of it's brilliant. But this movie, on the other hand, which I had rewatched all of these with my brother this year, because he hadn't seen a few of them for a long time, and he hadn't seen all of them. So he wanted to start from the start. And he really pulled his way through. It was like dragging a corpse through the mud. I imagine a corpse is a heavy person, so it was like that. Not great for him. I loved it. I hadn't actually realized how, except for the first film, which I always thought I really liked, I do not care for the second, third, and fourth ones. But when rewatching them, I'm like, I kind of like them. They're not great movies, but I enjoy them more and more the more I watch them. The third one gets a lot better on rewatch. The fourth one gets so much better on rewatch. You realize that a lot of the stuff that I hated about it is so minimal compared to the fun stuff. But it's like, it still doesn't feel perfect. It's like you're adding ingredients and you're kind of giving people dishes that just don't quantify the servings that you need. It's like, it's not there, but almost. But Retribution, beautiful, perfect dish. Final Cut burnt the crap out of it, but bad aftertaste. Not a good dessert, I guess. Like a souffle. It looks pretty, but it's ugly as fuck. It tastes like crap as well. So, yeah. But Retribution, excellent film. Retribution is one of those films where it knows what it wants to do, and it takes advantage of all of its ideas, and it's very fun. It's just like a fun roller coaster, but one that doesn't make you want to throw up, I guess. 2013. A very peak high school year for me. Doctor Who Day of the Doctor. Technically a TV special, but was released in cinema, and that's how I've watched it. I watched it in cinema, I've watched it on DVD and Blu-ray, because I got the steelbook from my brother. It's just really fun. I was surprised that of all the films to add for 2013 that was on my what I've watched, this was one I'm like, you know what? I love Modern Who. I grew up with it. I don't watch it anymore because I got tired during the Capaldi era, though I still like some of his episodes. I did not, obviously, go for a juvenile. Fuck that. I struggled through the first season and then bother with the rest of it and watched like the last 20 minutes of the last episode that she was in. I don't mind her as an actress, don't mind her as a doctor, just bad writing in general. But Day of the Doctor is just, has always been something that I found really fun. You know, I love David Tennant's Doctor, I love Matt Smith's Doctor, I've always loved their companions, their stories. It's a really fun film. It's a really fun episode of a very long, endearing series, and it plays interesting respects to the series. I know a lot of older fans hated the fact that they didn't include like the older Doctors outside of like Tom Baker, and they kind of rectified that with the quote-unquote 60th anniversary special, which was Whittaker's last episode, where they were like, oh, we're going to have like a bunch of the old Doctors come back as like hologram versions of her past selves. And sure, that's fine. They could have still done that with Day of the Doctor, but, you know, if not for Sherlock, there could have been a bit better written. Because, you know, Moffat was juggling so many fucking eggs in one basket. Nevertheless, it's a childhood favourite, and I've always loved it. And I think that was like the start of the end of me enjoying Doctor Who a lot. I didn't care much for it, so, like, about a year later, I'm like, I don't care much for Doctor Who that much anymore. I'm like, I think I'm done. I'm tired of it. But I still watched it. But I'm excited for the new series, though. Like, both the special with David Tennant and the new Doctor. I'm like, this could be really fun. You know, good TV. Then we got 2014 with Interstellar. Interstellar, another film I wish I'd watched in IMAX. Oh, wait, I have. Didn't watch it in the initial release, but I have rewatched it. I have watched it in IMAX since then, and that was wonderful. This is just my favourite Nolan, which is why I didn't really want to include The Dark Knight, because I'm like, I know I'm going to include Interstellar, it's my favourite of his films. But, again, no Speed Racer on my Letterboxd list. Wow. But I love this film. I've always loved it. I love the visuals, I love the score. I don't give a shit that the message is that love transcends space and time, because fuck you, why not? It's a goddamn movie. So, I don't have much to say about this one. A lot of it for me speaks for itself, but it depends on the kind of sci-fi you like, it depends on the kind of style you like with this kind of blend, but I think it's a mixture of visuals, the score and everything. It's a wonderful combination. I still don't like the cut between the IMAX sequences and the standard ratio. I really hate that. I hate that he does that. It's my least favorite thing about Nolan. It does my goddamn head in. The only film he's done it effectively was technically The Dark Knight, because he did it very minusculely. Hey, you want to see this really great scene on a really big screen? There you go. The rest of it, not so big. And Dunkirk, where he's like got a full screen for IMAX and a slightly slimmer screen for the standard ratio. So, you know, it's not that disorienting. For this one, it kind of is. That's my only criticism of Interstellar, basically. So, yeah. 2015 is a very tricky year. I've put Mad Max Fury Road as my favourite, but it's up against Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, and this is where a lot of these years get really hard, because some of these I cannot find a specific delineation. I love both of these films. They're basically a tie for me. I've grown up with the Mission Impossible films, not so much Mad Max, but I have seen all of them. I don't care as much for the original trilogy, but I do. I mean, they're fine. They're enjoyable. The Road Warrior's still really fun, but I've just always loved Fury Road. I think most people of my age who grew up with it over the originals have always loved it. Like, my dad still likes it, but he always prefers, you know, the Road Warrior, because he's like, oh, Fury Road is just a combination of Road Warrior and and Beyond Thunderdome. I'm like, sure, yes, but it's also like fun, you know. So it's just great visuals, great style, and Mission Impossible. It's just fun. It's my favorite of the Mission Impossible films. So that's why it's really hard to like not have that in it as well. And I've always adored the films. I will endlessly rewatch these two. I think Rogue Nation was the more important one for me of that year, but upon later years, Fury Road has had more of an impact. It's just, they both kind of have their own avenues, and I just love both of them, so, yeah. It's kind of a tie. Then in 2016, my obvious favourite, which is one of my favourite films of all time, is... Well, these are both my favourite films of all time. But Swiss Army Man is my 2016 choice. That one I have adored since I first watched it, and every year since then. I like their types of films, the two that I've seen. Yeah. I've just always loved Swiss Army Man. I much prefer it to Everything Everywhere. It's just a personal preference. I feel like I have to delineate that. It's just, yeah, it's in like my top 10 favourite films. But for me, Swiss Army Man, I've always loved it. I've loved it from start to finish. It's just one of those films where I can just show it to anyone who I've met. And for the most part, I think it's like a 99% percentage rate. Everyone I've showed it to has liked the film. So it's just really fun for me. 2017 is a very obvious answer. It's my favourite film of all time. It's Blade Runner 2049. Do I need to dive further into it? I've always loved 2049. It's, again, my favourite. You get the point. It's my favourite film of all time. There's not much else to go on about it. I love the original, but I've always preferred 2049. It just... 10 out of 10 movie for me. 2018, Annihilation. Because sometimes you just need some good old pessimistic... But in the fun way. No. I love the books that it's based on. I actually read them after watching the film. One of my favourite book trilogies. And I don't care much for reading like sci-fi and that kind of stuff. But, I mean, they're short, so it's really nice. But I really like them. But yeah, I've just loved this film. I love its style. I love the music, the visuals. It's just a gorgeous film. It's terrifying, but in like a... Again, kind of a pessimistic nihilism kind of way. Not really nihilism. My friend said it was more of a pessimistic film than nihilistic. But yeah, it's just good stuff. 2019 is a really tricky one for me, because all three of these are masterpieces of their own right. I've currently put John Wick Chapter 3 as my leading one, which I know I would have put the first one. It's my favourite of them, the first one is, but I had to put it up against Interstellar, so it's like, sorry, I gotta put up Interstellar. 2019 is John Wick 3, Parasite, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. All three of these being amazing pieces of cinema. I think if I was to knock one off, I would knock off Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, just because Parasite and John Wick have... I don't know, just more impactful to me in a way. Like, because again, once I've seen a lot of Tarantino's films, and I do love Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but these other two films are very different to what I've seen before. I mean, obviously John Wick, I've seen the other two John Wicks, I've seen all four of them, but I really love the third one. I don't know if I love it. I think I love it more than I love Parasite. Parasite's just a masterpiece of a film. And I've watched it maybe 3 times now, I think. Arguably 4? I can't remember. I should probably look that up, actually. Okay, I've logged it 3 times. I've given it a masterpiece status each time, and I've always enjoyed watching it. I haven't watched it for a while now, whereas John Wick 3 I've watched, I think, 3 times as well, actually. I watched it like twice in cinema, and then I watched it a few weeks ago before the 4th one came out. I just love it. I love that style of action. I love Keanu Reeves' films. There's just a style to it that's just got some elegance to it. But at the same time, so does Parasite. So what can I say? They're both masterpieces in their own right. Okay, we're looking at 2020. This one was interesting because 2020 was obviously a very different year for films. And initially I had pinned down Another Round as my film to put down, because I've given it 4.5 stars. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But in all honesty, I'm probably going to go with one which is a bit lower rated. If I take a look at all the 2020 releases that I watched, I think I'm going to go with The Empty Man. This is directed by David Pryor, who I believe had edited a bunch of David Fincher documentaries, or like had just made the documentaries, like making ofs of like Fincher's films or whatever. And I think he edited some of his films as well. This is like his first feature. It was like direct to streaming, which really sucked. Like, I don't think we ever got a theatrical release in Australia. If we did, it was very, very limited. To the point that the physical media release has been a DVD, which I've happily bought, because it's like if that gets removed from Disney Plus, I'm never going to watch it again on Disney Plus. I've got it on 4K. You know, I think I watched it. I might have watched it on Foxtel. Yeah, I can't remember how I watched it initially. I haven't written down how I watched it. I might have pirated it. I'll be honest. Yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I probably did that. I might have watched it on Disney Plus, but I think it came out a bit later. But I mean, there was some interesting releases in 2020. I mean, Empty Man was really good. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked it. It's had more of an impact. I'm yet to rewatch it, so I haven't watched it in the past 3 years. Actually, I watched it in April of 2021. That's how late it came out in Australia. But yeah, it was good. But I had mixed that with, like, say, Love and Monsters as well, which was like straight to Netflix, which I really liked that film. And I wanted to put down Shiver Baby because that's just a tremendous film, which I'd given 5 stars. Again, a lot of 2020 films, but I only just watched that like the other week before I filmed the rest of the footage, because you'll notice that probably a different angle, different shirt. So I wanted to put down Empty Man because I remembered, I'm like, wait, I put down Another Round, and I never thought to myself, do I want to look more into 2020? So yeah, it was just, yeah, it was The Empty Man. The Empty Man is my 2020 pick. I'd check it out if I was you. It's a hard film to find now, but I mean, again, Disney Plus. But yeah, it's really good. So 2021, on the other hand, this is the tricky one, because this one's really hard for me to define. Old and Malignant. Malignant, I loved on first watch. I've loved it on second watch. I've loved it on third watch. Old, on the other hand, I didn't love it the first time I watched it. But for me, it's a more critical film, because with Malignant, it's like the Conjuring films if they were more fun, and also Basket Case, and also The Matrix, you know. And I love the style. I find it very funny, and I don't find it terrifying, but I do like the exaggerations in its visual language. So that's why I'm not pinning it as my most influential, my favorite of the year, because Old, on the other hand, it's what allowed me to really realize how talented Shyamalan was as a filmmaker. Like, he's already done some amazing films, and most of those would have been, and arguably are, in his pre-2005 work, what's that one film that he did that everyone hates? The Happening? The Happening. Like, I love The Happening, but that's as a so bad it's good kind of film for me. But all of his films prior to that are masterpieces. Most of his films after that are quite awful, until, like, The Visit and Split. So, yeah, I still really like them. I like his style of filmmaking, but Old, I think, is his masterpiece, which I know a lot of people would even argue, like, Unbreakable or probably The Sixth Sense is his masterpiece. But I'm like, I think that was like one of those, he's got a great visual style, he's got a great presence, but he has to confine himself to what, I'd say, like, studio stuff, and making sure that the regular folk can watch his movies. But Old is just getting this great idea and then having this absurd visual language to it. I know a lot of people are always critical of, like, his dialogue is so weird. Why do people talk like that? People don't talk like that. It's a fucking movie. It's not meant to be realistic. It's about a beach where people get old. You expect realism? Go to Las Vegas. That's not realistic either, but I don't know. I don't know what my point is. Nevertheless, no one complains about the visual style, which is like someone is like half in the shot, or like half the shot's out of focus, and it's like mostly out of focus on the person. There's like all these interesting visual takes, and it's just such a dynamic film. It's mostly the visuals that I absolutely love about it, but his style of storytelling, the care you have for the characters, there's a lot to it. And again, I didn't love it on first watch, but I really liked it. But on second watch, I'm like, this is it. This is his masterpiece. This is his fucking movie. So I absolutely adore it. And last but not least, we're going into 2022. This one's a tricky one for me, because I wanted to put West Side Story and like Licorice Pizza as like my main ones for like 2021, but Old and Malignant were always more fun to me, for different reasons. 2022 is a difficult one, because both of these films I've only watched them once, and I've enjoyed them both in very similar attributes. It's The Fabelmans and Confess Fletch. I think my favourite of the two is probably Confess Fletch, but that's just because I had a lot of fun watching the film because it is a comedy. It's a mystery comedy. And I'd never seen any previous Fletch films, but I love the cast. I love how it's done. It's just a really fun movie. Fabelmans is like masterpiece movie, you know. It's Spielberg. It's going to be well directed. It's going to be well written. It's going to be well acted. Everything about it is like top of its goddamn game. Which is why I think I preference Confess Fletch, because it's one of those like struggle to get made. I love that it even exists. It's impossible that it exists, but I love it. And it's had more, I think, of an impact to me to some degree, where like you can see those shorter, more enjoyable, like little tight, just enjoy. It's like 90 minutes or whatever. It's just like the perfect kind of film. Where Fabelmans is like 2.5 hours. It's about a guy's life story, like a fictionalized version of his life story. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like, it's still really well made, but I think Confess Fletch for me is just not the better film, just for me the more preferred film. Because sometimes you go in it from different avenues, and again, all these films, compared them to other films that were released on those years, compared them to a lot of different avenues, including my own personal bias, my own personal mindsets, which changes each week, each year. You know, this year I'm loving ScoobyDoo. Last year, 2002, could have been something that, I don't know what else came out in 2002. Too Fast, Too Furious? So, like, was that 2003? That was probably 2003. Nevertheless, it's one of those things where each year I will look at films differently, and I like that about it. It's an evolving taste. It's not just, I adore this film and I have no critical mindset on it. It's like, no, that's why I want to go with Letterboxd, because all these films I've added to my Letterboxd have been post me starting uni. So that's giving me an adult mindset, basically. Like, post the age of 18, I have a more adult mindset, a more critical mindset in terms of film. Not film criticism, but like understanding film, because I studied film at the end of high school, and I got a degree on film studies in university. So it's like, I have a more defined perspective. You know, like I could put other films that I like, say again, like Speed Racer and stuff like that. Stuff like that I know I would have loved between 98 to, say, 2016, that I would say, oh, this is like the better film. But it's A, not on my Letterboxd, and B, I have a different perspective to that film because I haven't watched it since then. You know, maybe I watched it 100 times before 2017, but... Well, 2018 was when I got Letterboxd. But at the same time, it's the effect of how I've got with a critical mindset. I say critical, I don't mean as in cynical. It's different. I'm not being cynical about all these movies I'm watching. I'm being like able to understand it from an analytical point of view, through a filmmaking point of view, for a contextual that's different to the movie point of view. So, again, much like Confess Fletch, where I could look at it as a standard mystery movie and be like, yeah, that was fun, but masterpiece is The Fabelmans, because it's Spielberg, and it's so well done, and he had the money and all this kind of stuff. But it's like, yeah, but Fabelmans is like... Confess Fletch is like the diamond in the rough, you know? Like, I had to go through all this shit to get made, and what we have is so great, and I love it. So, and that's still like my lowest rated of like all these films. It's like 3.5 stars, but I still really like it. So it just is what it is. Anyway, that's all. I don't know. You don't have to make your own list, but let me know of my choices what you think. Do you think any of those are bad choices? You probably do. It doesn't matter. It's all subjective. But yeah, I figure this would be a fun video to tackle. It's a great idea, actually. So I'll give credit to Elliot Cohen and I guess Films at Home, who's also gone into the chase. What is the genre? The binge. I don't know what it's called. I can't remember the name. Either way, I really enjoyed this. It was really fun looking at all these films, especially the ones I actually looked on my Letterboxd, and I'm like, oh, interesting. I forgot I watched that. Or hey, yeah, I can do that one. Like a lot of them are tricky to choose from, but I'm pretty happy with my choices, and they've all got some kind of influence to the point that I am at now. So yeah. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time in whatever other video I have. Bye.